We're going to go ahead and get started here this morning, folks. Welcome. It is so good to see everybody out here this morning. I want to thank you for coming here. I have a lesson here today that I'm pretty excited about. I'll tell you, whenever I put this together, I don't know that I was as excited about it as I am this morning. I think there's something here that I learned, and I think there might be something here for you to learn here today. But before we get into that, I have a routine that we go through here at the beginning of class, the first of which is to review our core values. We talk about, in the first core value that we like to just sort of refocus our minds with, is what was Jesus' primary value? Jesus always valued people. Jesus valued people. Now, at Cochran Community Church, we have 8 core values. Anybody want to help me fill in some of these blanks? Bible, there we go. All right, let's bury me. Worship, prayer, service. Oh, you guys are beautiful. Outreach, relevancy, stewardship. I'm sure I missed some. And the last one, which one? Henry, which one are we missing? No, well, that's coming. Beautiful, beautiful. Timeliness comes here. We're missing community. Community. And then within this group, we have 2 core values. One is timeliness, as Henry reminded us, and the other is growth. All right, beautiful, beautiful. We are growing. Today, and let me just give you a preview of the next couple of weeks. It's been really interesting. Whenever I started putting this stuff together, I had really no curriculum. I just had a general direction in which we're going. And each lesson that I'm teaching is sort of opening to my eyes to additional lessons that we need, that I think we need to go through, at least I need to go through. And so this week we're going to look at love and leadership. And those may not be things that you normally associate together, but that's our topic today. Next week is one of my favorite lessons. I've probably taught this maybe 4 times over the last 5 or 6 years. It's my dedicated Bob Kroll message. It's the lesson on intentionality. And I'm going to tell you right now, that lesson, whenever I learned this lesson several years ago, that's a lesson that changed my life. And I'm going to tell you that I've taught the full lesson, I've taught fragments of this lesson, but really want to encourage you to be here next week as we look at intentionality. The week after that, we're going to do a lesson. We were talking I think it was last week, about the promises of God. And do you know God's promises for you? And it's tentatively titled Words to Live By. That's what we're going to be looking at here in 2 weeks. The week after that, I'm looking at a lesson on worth and worship. Worth and worship. And then this is very much, it's not fully formed, but the week after that is going to be a lesson on flow, which just trust me, you're not going to want to miss that one. Hopefully these things are going to be all sort of building together. So that's what the next month looks like after today, just so you know the direction I'm going. If you're enjoying the lessons, I want to encourage you to come. If you're really enjoying them, I want to encourage you to invite somebody to come with you. I have been recording these lessons. These lessons sometimes get put on YouTube, sometimes get shared into the church Facebook group. Just something that I have learned is that if you really want things to stick, you need to go through it a couple of times. So, I want to encourage you to take the time and review it. I've shared with you before, we need to be reminded so much more than we need to be taught. So sometimes we need to have these things brought to the front of our minds again. Now today, we're going to be looking at the topic of love. And love is such a huge topic in Scripture. You can find it all over the place as you read the Bible. And there's no way that we're going to be able to do a comprehensive assessment of love in a single class. So we're going to be looking at love from a very specific angle here this morning. Now, you've probably had some assessment of this. Is this really the time, 9:55? In the Greek, when you look at your Bible is divided into Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament is primarily written in Hebrew. There's a little bit of Aramaic in there. It's been translated to English. When we look at the New Testament was written in Greek, and the Greek has been translated to English. Now, what's interesting is sometimes in different languages, you have different words that translate the same way into another language. And so when we look at the Greek, there's actually at least 4 words that we translate to love in English. Now, you've probably heard at least parts of this before, but there's 4 words. The first one is eros. The second one is philia. The third one is, I think this is storge. I could be wrong on that. And then the fourth one is agape. Now, just by means of giving you just a quick definitions, eros, that is the type of love you have that has a physical attraction associated with it. That's love with a physical attraction. Philia, that is love without physical attraction. The one that, the illustration that you often get with this is Philadelphia, right? It's the city of brotherly love. And if you've ever been to Philadelphia, it doesn't always feel that way. I don't know if you've ever been there. Bob, it's a rough town. My experience has been, it's a rough town, right? But that doesn't mean they don't love you, right? If you're one of them, they stick up for you, right? That's where we are. Storge is a love without physical attraction, but the love is one directional, right? And the way that I found that probably best explains this is that it's the love that a mother has for a newborn baby, right? It's this one directional love. And then the last one, agape, this is unconditional love. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is a love that nothing changes. There's nothing you can do that this love changes. Things can happen with these other loves where, the love that you have for somebody changes. Am I in the way, Sharon? Now, if you, and I didn't bring it with me, but if you bring your Bible concordance and you look up the word love and you're looking in the New Testament, you're going to find that overwhelmingly in the New Testament, whenever you see the word love, it comes from this Greek word agape. It's talking about unconditional love. So we're going to look at a couple of verses, and I have the verses on the board here. We're going to go quickly today. I got a lot of notes that I want to get through here today. Some of them you probably don't need to look up because they're going to be somewhat familiar to you. But we'll start off with first, perhaps the most famous verse in all the Bible, but John 3:16, which reads, "For God so loved the world." So God had such unconditional love for the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life, right? That's what we have. That's one introduction that we have to love. We have another introduction, which is in Matthew 22. Matthew 22, let me find it here, verses 36 through 40. This is a time when Jesus is being tested by the religious leaders of the day, and they say, hey, what's the most important commandment in the law? And what Jesus tells them is, it reads, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Verse 37, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God." Unconditional love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love, unconditional love, your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. Now, I want to link with that John chapter 13:34. This is a verse that we get from the end of Jesus' ministry. This is at the Last Supper, and Jesus is with his disciples, and he gives them this instruction. He says to them, "A new command I give you, love, unconditional love one another, as I have unconditionally loved you." So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another, right? And with each of these, we have this unconditional love that is being referenced. We are told to love with these illustrations, when we're told to love our neighbors and when we're told to love one another, that we are told that we need to love people who have made different choices in life. We're told to love people that have made choices that are perhaps different than the choices you've made or you would have made. We are told to love people who like different things. Any Steeler fans in here that will admit to it? Okay, a couple of you. You're told that you're told to love Browns fans. You know, understand, and that's tough, isn't it, Henry? That's really tough. If I said if there's a Cardinal fan in here, Henry has both hands up and a foot, right? You know, you're not going to find a bigger Cardinal fan than Henry. But you know what? Every once in a while, you gotta love a panther or a tiger or a bear or whatever. You know, that's what we're told to do. But I'll tell you, I found that it was very easy to hate the lions, tigers, and bears. I did. Like some of them were. Well, that's a story that's a lesson for another time, right? We're told to love people who walk differently. We're told to love people who talk differently. We're called to love people who look differently than we do. Why are we called to do this? I'm going to tell you right now, unconditional love is the most transformational force on this planet. Unconditional love is the most transformational force on the planet. Unconditional love helped the blind to see. It helped the lame to walk. It healed the sick. It saved the sinner, and it saved a world. Think about that. That's what unconditional love has done. And so as Christians, as people who say that they are followers of Christ, and if you haven't heard this little lesson of mine, I'll do the real short version. Christian, right? Christ-I-N. And that I-A-N at the end means one who does. One who does. So if that's what Jesus told us that we are to do, that is what we are to do. There is not a person that you encounter that you should not offer unconditional love to. That includes people of different races, of different genders, of different political dispositions. Everybody that we come across, we should be giving unconditional love to. But I'm going to tell you this, our enemy stands in opposition to unconditional love. The enemy stands in opposition to that. And what he does is he peddles fear. And one of the biggest fears that the enemy peddles is the fear of losing love. It's the fear of losing love. You see, the enemy whispers to us, he says things, you know, if people knew this particular thing about you, you wouldn't be loved. Have you heard that lie? Has that been whispered to you before, or is that maybe that's just the one that I hear? Right? You have this whispered to you all the time. It reminded me, has anybody seen the movie Home Alone? It's an annual tradition that we watch that in our house come around Thanksgiving time. But towards the end of that movie, you have Kevin, he's in the church, and his neighbor is sitting next to him. Remember this scene? If I knew how to do videos and stuff, I would have shown you the scene because it's only like 16 seconds long. But Kevin's at the concert in the church, and he's talking with his neighbors, and he's talking with his neighbor, and he said, one year, I got a sweater with a big bird knitted on it. And his neighbor said, oh, that's nice. Kevin says, not for a guy in the second grade. Not for you can get beat up wearing something like that, right? I had a friend who got nailed because there was a rumor he wore dinosaur pajamas. You remember that scene? And what's that about? It's about the fear of losing love. It's about the fear of not being accepted. It's this fear of rejection, this fear of loss of love. Have anybody here been made fun of? Besides me, I've been made fun of. We've probably all, some of us have probably even made fun of people, right? You know, that's sort of how we do. Trace is sitting up here. I'll tell you right now, my dad has not stopped making fun of her. We've been together how many years? Almost 20, I think, something like that. 20. I'm trying to be complimentary here, but my dad still makes fun of her, right? That's how it goes, right? But we need to know that sometimes this fear of losing love is used in a manipulative way, right? Have you ever witnessed that? Have you ever witnessed this fear of loss of love being used to manipulate somebody? And when we fear loss of love, what happens is it can lead to clinginess, it can lead to insecurity, and it can lead to the inability to maintain healthy relationships. I want you to think about that. In the Bible, there's several stories and passages that we can see this, we can understand that this fear of loss of love or the loss of losing favor with somebody. And I'm not going to read through these today, but you can find them here. We have Matthew 15, verses 11 through 37. This is the story of the prodigal son. And if you remember that story, the son says, you know what, I want my inheritance now. And he goes and he lives life up, and he finds himself in really bad shape. And he just thinks, if only I could go back to my father's house. And he goes back, and he is so fearful of this, right? And little did he know, his father is still going to love him, right? But it was this fear of the loss of love that kept him at a distance for so long. We're not going to read this, but Matthew 26, 69 through 75, this is where it's illustrated. Jesus had told Peter that you're going to deny me. And in these 6 verses, we have this come to fruition. Peter rejects, I don't know who Jesus is. I don't know, get away from me. I don't have any idea who this guy is, right? That's what happens in this little passage. And as soon as he rejects Jesus the third time and he hears the rooster crow, he's filled with remorse. He's filled with fear. He's like, oh my goodness, I have lost Jesus' trust. He's not going to love me anymore. We all deal with this. These are just 2 stories that highlight the human experience of the fear of losing love. Whether it's losing God's love, whether it's losing the love of a parent, whether it's losing the love of a trusted friend, we all deal with this. And when we live in fear of losing love, it can bind us and it can restrict us from becoming the people that God created us to be. This little idea right here is what leads to the lesson on flow a month from now, right? Where that's going to contribute there. But I want you to not lose sight of this. It doesn't end there. The fear of loss of love, because we fear losing love, what we can also do is the other way around, is we can fear giving love. Have you ever done that? Like a couple weeks ago, I shared the story of George Costanza, right? He was like, oh, I think this might be the girl. And he tells her, I love you. And she says, I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat, right? And later in the episode, George decides that he's going to tell her again. And she says, I heard you the first time, right? You know, he was rejected. He had this. He was so concerned about showing love to someone. And that happens to all of us, does it not? Does it not? We've all been there. We've all gone through that. We fall for this trap that if I don't give it in the first place, then I'm never going to have to take it back. Right? And when we do this, we don't experience all that life has to offer. And this isn't new. This isn't something that's just a modern day occurrence, right? Jesus tells us a story about this. We're not going to read this, but you're welcome to read this on your own. It's a story I'm sure you're familiar with. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 10, 25 through 37. And what do we have here? You have this traveler who's beaten and left along the side of the road. And then the Samaritan comes down the road, and what does he do? He crosses over to the other side. He doesn't even give the love. Doesn't even give the love, right? But it's the Samaritan who would otherwise be rejected who came, and what did he do? He gave the love to the traveler who had been injured. Now, when we withhold love, giving love to others, what we're doing is we're living in violation of this command to love our neighbors as ourselves. And the more I got to thinking about it, I think there's also an issue where it's not just that we withhold love from our neighbors, sometimes we withhold love from ourselves. Does that sound familiar to anybody? That you withhold love from yourself. It's a diabolical part of the enemy's plan to get you to not love yourself. You know, there's some people that just are disgusted by themselves. And this isn't new either. It isn't new either. We can, and I just pulled out a couple of examples. I didn't put verses on the board, but I'll tell you right now, I absolutely believe Moses struggled with that. You know, Moses grew up in the palace. And then through some actions that I don't think there was any intention for, an Egyptian man ends up dead, and so what's he do? He goes and he's living in the wilderness. God comes to him and says, I have a job for you. And Moses says, I don't think so. Moses, I would suggest to you that Moses really wasn't loving himself at that time. He said, send somebody else. Surely there's somebody who is more eloquent in speech than I am, right? Moses, I would suggest, struggled with loving himself. I would suggest Gideon. If you're familiar with the story of Gideon, God comes to Gideon and says, Gideon, do I have a job for you? And Gideon says, are you sure? And God says, yes, I'm sure. And he says, are you double sure? Right? He goes through this whole process. And God's saying, yes, I am sure, I am sure, I am sure. Gideon didn't quite have that self-love, that self-confidence in himself, right? King Saul struggled with insecurity, right? What he did is he failed to trust God and then and didn't do what God told him to do. And just the dramatic impact that had on the entire nation of Israel. Right? For those of you that aren't familiar, the king that Saul spared, it was one of his descendants that would be the chief antagonist for Esther. Right? Haman was the one who said, "Hey, let's create a law to get rid of all the Jews." He was a descendant of King Agag, who Saul had spared. I will suggest this. I think most of us struggle with loving ourselves. And maybe it's just me, right? But I would suggest we probably have all had some struggle with loving ourselves. And when we do not love ourselves, we undermine what God can do for, we undermine what God can do with, and we undermine what God can do through us. So let me just remind you right now, God loves you. He loves you. He loves you unconditionally. He has enormous plans for you. They're not easy. I'm reasonably sure that the plans God has for each of us are not easy. But I will tell you this. I absolutely believe that He has big plans. And in a couple of weeks, we're gonna look at that, right? We're going to look at those promises God has made for us. And you're not going to want to miss that message. Because if you miss that message and you're stuck in this area, you're going to continue to stay stuck. And for those of you that are note takers, this is one of my favorite notes to take. Stuck stinks. It's a horrible place to be. A horrible place to be is stuck. Now, I'm going to transition here a little bit, and we're going to go to 1 John 4:16. It reads, "Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. And this is how God showed His love among us. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins." God loves you so much. He loves you so much. And the only thing that you have to do is accept it. There's not some Herculean task that you have to go through. All you have to do, this love that's coming for you, you just have to accept it. You just have to surrender to the love of God. Now, I want to go into a section here, and I want to tell you how can we become a person of love? How can we do this? And I got a couple things for here. But the first thing I want to remind you of is that there is something, there's a principle that reads like this: like attracts like. What is most attracted to a magnet? A magnet. A magnet is most, this idea that opposites attract, that's great for the romance stories and novels and whatever. But understand this, like attracts like, right? If you had a Steeler fan here, what's going to be attracted to a Steeler fan? Other Steeler fans, right? That's just what happens. Like attracts like. So, so understand this. People that reject love are going to be pushing people away. That's what they do. The example I thought of this was I thought of Scrooge in the Dickens novel of A Christmas Carol, right? If you're familiar with that, his nephew comes and is inviting him to Christmas dinner, and he's like, "Get away from me! Get away from me! Get away!" And what's he do? He pushes everybody away from him, and he's a miserable old man, right? He has rejected all these things. So what we need to do is we need to make ourselves attractive to love. We want to attract love. And so we need to tune our hearts and minds to love. And one of the easiest things you can do, is this. We start by telling ourselves, before we have a conversation with anybody, we say to ourselves, "I love this person." When your phone rings and there's a name on your phone, before you answer the phone, you need to say to yourself, "I love this person." And I'm going to tell you what, when you answer the phone, you'll answer it in a different way. Try the opposite of it. Phone rings, you look at it, you say, "Oh, I hate this person," you're going to answer it in a different way. Right? That's just the way it is. When we have to, like tune in your radio to your favorite type of music, right? You need to tune your attitude towards love. And one of the easiest things to do is to remind yourself, this is a person I love. When we are done here today, we're going to walk out of this room. First person you come in contact with, before you say hello to them, remind yourself, this is a person I love. See what happens. See what happens, right? So the first thing, I'm just going to call this tuning. And there's probably a better word for it, but that's how sophisticated I am, right? We need to tune ourselves to love, right? Now the second thing we need to do is we need to remember that life is a process. And we're all going through it. We're all going through this process. We are all growing. We are all developing. Some of us at different rates, right? Some of us in life, we are going through an uphill portion. Some of us in life are going through a downhill portion. Where is everybody right now on that scale? And the truth is, we're all over the place. We're all over the place with that. And because of that, when we have encounters with one another, you have somebody on the downswing interacting with somebody on the upswing. That's what happens. And I don't know which part of that you're in, but you will find that. And what we need to do is, because we're in a process, this requires that we have grace for one another when we encounter them. We need to give space to each other as we go through the ups and downs of life. Life is a process. We have ups, we have downs, but we need grace. We need grace. You cannot expect that everyone is having their best day when you encounter them. You can't expect that. That's simply not true. And who we are lies somewhere in this range. Like, I want you to think of your best day ever. Whatever that best day ever is. Now, I also want you to think about what's your worst day ever. And where do you normally occupy that space? Here's your best day ever. Here's your worst day ever. And chances are you're somewhere in between. Right? That's something that we need to have just a perspective on. We're not as good as our best day, right? And we're not as bad as our worst day. That's the reality of it. We're somewhere in between. And what we need to do is we need to recognize that we are going to encounter people not on their best day and not on their worst day. We just need to give them some space and understand that life is a process. So the next thing I want to remind you of is this. We need to exercise compassion and patience. And this is probably the part of the lesson I need to learn the most? Compassion and patience, right? How easy is it to lose your patience? I'm saying that. I started to tell you a story this morning about trying to live in a household with 2 teenagers, one of which who I am losing my patience with rapidly. I am losing my patience with her rapidly, right? Now, what do I need to have? I need to be reminded to have patience. I need to have compassion on what is going on there. Fourth, I'm going to call this perspective. And the perspective is this: no matter what you have going on, you need to understand you don't know the whole story. As you look around this room, how many of you know the whole story of what's going on with anybody else in this room? No hands go up. Right? I got to thinking about this, working in healthcare. One of the biggest challenges in healthcare is your healthcare team tries to help you based on interacting with you for a few minutes. Now, think about this. When's the last time you went to the doctor? Last time you went to the doctor, how much time were you there? Let's just say, I'm going to try to be generous here. Let's say that you had 30 minutes with your doctor. You probably didn't. You probably had 6 or 12 or whatever. But let's just say you had 30 minutes with your doctor. And let's say you do this every 6 months. Now, where are my math whizzes in here? I'm looking for Sean. You're not my math. Cheryl, you're my math. So like here's the calculus of it, right? You have 30 minutes on one side, but then between that 30 minutes that you see the doctor, the other side of that is 6 months. And the other side of 6 months is 6 months times 30 days per month times 24 hours a day times 60 minutes an hour. By my calculation, and Cheryl can confirm this for me, it's 259,200 minutes. And what you have is you have 259,200 minutes, and you're going to try to solve all that in 30. Like, how does that work out? You don't know the whole story. You don't know somebody's whole story. That's just the way it is. It's not even close. And so what we need to do is we need to seek to understand. Seek to understand. That's the key. We need to endeavor to demonstrate that someone's voice has been heard. Now, men, I have told you this before. I'll tell you this again. Like, if you listen to nothing else today, listen to this. One of the best ways to connect with your wife is to repeat her words back to her. If she says, I am so mad that fill in the blank says, I understand that you are mad for fill in the blank. You are so mad that I never listen. Like, she'll be like, yes, I am so mad that you never listen. And the more you do that, the more that's going to connect. Now, this is the other thing that I learned, and I had to do this with Brendan the other day. Brendan came home and she said, Dad, by the way, I'm going to the football game at Lakeview. And I said, oh, really? Oh, yeah, I told Mom. And so I had to say, Brendan, come here. And I had to hold both of her hands. Now, men, you hold both of the women in your life, you hold both of their hands, so then that way they can't hit you. You just hold on to them. You hold on to them. And then it forces the connection. Like in my household, they actually are like, Dad, don't make me hold your hands. Like, we've got to have this. We have to connect. I had to say, Brendan, like, I understand that you just had a birthday and you feel like you're big stuff, but you're in my household and you don't tell me what you're doing. You don't just announce that this is what I'm doing. Oh, it's because Mom and I talked about this, which is probably, I don't know if they did or not. I never verified that, but that's probably the game that she's playing. Oh, I told Mom. Mom was okay with it, right? That's where we are. So we need to get perspective. This last one, this is perhaps my favorite note of the day, and the note is Jell-O. And what I mean by that, love is like Jell-O, always room for more. Love is like Jell-O. There is always room for more. God is love. God is infinite. So that means love is infinite. There is always room for more. No matter where you are in your relationships today, understand this. There's another level. There's another level in that relationships. It is possible to love someone more than you love them today. Now, let's turn this around. God is love, and we need to understand this. He loves us so much more than we can possibly comprehend. And the more you develop that relationship, the more you're going to realize, oh my goodness, I didn't realize he loved me this much. I didn't realize he loved me this much. You're going to go through this. Now, when I created this class, I titled it Clear Christianity, with CLEAR being an acronym standing for Communication, Leadership, Equipping, Attitude, and Relationships. Now, as we have gone through this, it has probably been clear, which is my dad joke attempt here this morning, right, that several parts of those have been addressed here. You can probably find a thread for communication. You can probably find a thread for relationships. You can probably find a thread for attitude. You can probably find some of that. But what may not be clear yet is the relationship that love has with leadership. You may not have that. So I need to make sure that I remind you of this. Those of you that have not been with me for a while or perhaps are new here today, I very much subscribe to this idea. Everybody in this room and everybody that you come across is a leader. They lead people, and this is my definition that I use for that. A leader is anyone who helps someone at some time do something or go somewhere. Have you ever helped someone at some time do something or go somewhere? And we're all going to shake our heads, yes. You are all leaders, right? You are a leader. Now, the only requirement it takes to be a leader is this. You need to care for somebody near you. Whether they're to your right, to your left, in front of you, behind you, that's the only thing it takes to be a leader. You just have to care for anyone. And so we all fit that description as well. So how does love impact your leadership? Because I think a lot of people would likely say that there would be a conflict. Like there's leadership and there's love, and those should be like you don't really think of loving your boss. Or maybe you do, but I would suggest there's a lot of people that don't really have that attitude towards their boss, right? Perhaps you've worked for a boss where you would not use the word loving to describe that relationship. Now, if we were to make a list of all the qualities of an ideal leader, what would be some of the things you would put on that list? Like, what are some of the things that you would want in your leader? Drive, okay. Wisdom, okay. Understanding. Vision. Discipline. In the trenches. I don't know how to make that short, and I don't know how to, I've struggled with spelling, Jenny. So, what else? Honesty. Let's do this. Turn with me, if you will. And this is where different Bible translations are so wonderful. I have, I think, about 4, maybe 5 different translations. 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through the first part of verse 8. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. That's NIV. NASB. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. It does not brag. It is not arrogant. It does not act disgracefully. It does not seek its own benefit. It is not provoked. does not keep an account of wrong suffered. It does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. It keeps every confidence. It believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. The message: love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut, doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others, isn't always me first, doesn't fly off the handle, doesn't keep score of the sins of others, doesn't revel when others grovel, takes pleasure in the flowering of truth, puts up with anything, trusts God always, always looks for the best, never looks back. New Living Translation. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable and keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Now, I don't know what you heard in that, but I'm going to tell you with those descriptions of what love is, I think that describes an ideal leader. I think that it does. You would want to work for a leader who is patient. You would want to work for a leader who is kind. You would want to work for a leader who does not envy and does not boast, one who is not proud, one who doesn't dishonor people. Right? Go through whatever translation you have, and I'm going to tell you that as you look at what Paul describes to the Corinthians there, you're going to say, oh my goodness, this would be a leader I would like to follow. And I think right there is our invitation for the day. Based on these definitions that Paul gives us, that would be a leader that we would all like to follow, isn't it? And I'm going to tell you right now, you do. You already follow a leader like that, right? 1 John 4:16, God is love. God is all of those things. That's who you follow. And that's how we should endeavor to lead others. We follow God's lead and we do His will. We are to lead like Him. We are to lead with patience. We are to lead with kindness. We are to lead with humility. We are to lead with honor, and so on, and so on, and so on. Whatever those words were that you heard or that you needed to hear, whatever you have in your translation, I think there is a perfect recipe there for you to lead people. Now, I trust by now you have an improved, if not slightly different view of this topic of love this morning. So let me remind you of Jesus' words from the Last Supper. Jesus said, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." I want to encourage each of us today to lead others with love. Lead others with love. Now, I haven't done this for a couple of weeks, but I like to put these three letters on the board. A-C-T, right? ACT. And that's to remind us that based on what you've learned today, what action will you take? What change will you make? And is there something that you learned today that you can share with somebody else? Can you teach somebody for your sake and theirs? But I will also tell you this. I tried to do this. I don't know how obvious it is from your seat. The biggest letter of those three is A. The challenge today is to act. The challenge today is to take an action. So let me give you a little bit of self-reflection here. Who is someone you can love better? Who is someone you can love better? And I want you to take the first name that comes to mind, write that name down. Write that name down. Who is somebody that you can love better? Now, once you know the who, the question becomes how. How will you love that person better? And I want to challenge you to write a statement that I will love this name by this action. Right? And I'm going to tell you right now, if you take the time to write it down right now, if you take that time to write it down right now, you have dramatically improved the chances of that actually happening this week. If you say, I'm going to come back to this, maybe later today, you won't. I know me, and as such, I'm reasonably sure that I know you. If you don't write this down right now, it ain't going to happen. You're going to go home, your kid's still going to be in bed, like the world's going to spin off its axis. There's going to be all sorts of challenges, right? But I want to encourage you to do that. Who is someone you can love better? And how can you do it? I will love this person by this action. That's what I have prepared for you today. And so that's where we will stop. That's what I have prepared. So